Okay, folks, I guess we will get started. I'm R.C. Davis-Indiano. I'm the director of the World Lit Today organization on campus. And did I hear applause starting for World Lit Today? Yes! I don't want to miss the opportunity. So we are the sponsors on campus, the hosts on campus for the Puterbaugh Lit Fest. And we want to thank, we're always thanking the Puterbaugh Foundation in McAlester, Oklahoma, for making these wonderful sessions that have been going on for 57 years now. So thousands of OU students have benefited from these sessions. And I'm the director of World Lit Today, and one of the most wonderful parts of my job is that I get to help introduce amazing, brilliant writers who need to be better known in the U.S. And that's exactly what's happening in a very big way today. You're really in for a treat. Before I get into the introduction, I want to remind you that Green Feather Books is out in the lobby, and they're selling books by several people, especially Guadalupe Nettel. So please take advantage of that, and you can get her to sign your book today. I wanted to remind you, in case you haven't seen this already in the program, that there is a wonderful presentation happening at Zero Hall from 12 to 1, and the head consul of Mexico from Oklahoma City will be there, and she's going to talk about U.S.-Mexico relations. And I asked her if she was going to talk about the Gulf of America, and she said, "Oh yeah, we'll definitely talk about that." And Guadalupe will do an office hour, which is just another way of saying a chance to meet her. If you haven't met her, that'll be from 2 to 3 today. Please stop by. It's in the conference room of World Literature Today. Last thing, please come to the reception tonight. It's in Baird Lounge from 7 to 8. That's what we've said. Honestly, we'll probably go 7 to 9, something like that. There'll be good food, and you'll hear the head consul again. We'll thank Guadalupe for being here, and then Daniel Simon will give the winners of the Student Translation Prize. So that's 7 to 8 in Baird Lounge. Guadalupe Nettel was born in Mexico City and spent part of her childhood in the south of France. And I think she actually has some kind of Mexican hybrid identity with the French side. While known for her fiction, she also has a PhD in linguistics. She has published many novels, short stories, and essays, and her work has been translated into 20 languages. She's received many literary prizes and recognitions, including the Bouchard Literary Fellowship and the Calamo Prize in 2016. And in 2016, she was a finalist for the Neustadt International Prize for Literature that we give here on campus. Suffice it to say that we have admired her work for a very long time. Guadalupe Nettel's writing often explores themes of motherhood, belonging, and the experience of outsiders. Hers is a world in which a man has an obsession for sniffing women's bathrooms. A girl tries to initiate her sex life by sliding down banisters. It is a world in which one girl is possessed by an evil being. One family in her work decides to adopt a diet of eating cockroaches, and a balding model compulsively plucks out her own hair. This is a literary universe precisely fitted to our time. A world in which exotic and bizarre characters seek community, but are bound to each other primarily through their solitude and their strangeness. In addition to her amazing fiction, in 2024, she was the chief editor of the Revista de la Universidad de Mexico and at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Please give a warm welcome to one of the most daring and exciting writers publishing today, Guadalupe Nettel.
Hello, thank you very much for this presentation and also for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here and finally meet people from this amazing magazine, World Literature Today. I'm very, very proud to be the guest of honor of this year. And I'm going to read in Spanish a text that is called Escribir con Luz. And Rosalind Harvey, that you met yesterday, is going to translate. We're going to do, like...
Double act.
Yeah. Escribir con luz. Nací con un lunar blanco o lo que otros llaman una mancha de nacimiento sobre la córnea de mi ojo derecho. No habría tenido ninguna relevancia de no haber sido porque la mácula en cuestión estaba en pleno centro del iris, es decir, justo sobre la pupila por la que debe entrar la luz hasta el fondo del cerebro. En esa época no se practicaban aún los trasplantes de córnea en niños recién nacidos. El lunar estaba condenado a permanecer ahí durante varios años. La obstrucción de la pupila favoreció el desarrollo paulatino de una catarata, de la misma manera en que un túnel sin ventilación se va llenando de moho. El único consuelo que los médicos pudieron dar a mis padres en aquel momento fue la espera. Seguramente, cuando hubiera dejado de crecer, la medicina habría avanzado lo suficiente para ofrecerles la solución que en ese entonces les faltaba. Mientras tanto, les aconsejaron someterme a una serie de ejercicios fastidiosos para que desarrollara en la medida de lo posible el ojo deficiente. Esto se hacía por medio de movimientos oculares, pero también, y es lo que más recuerdo, por medio de un parche que me tapaba el ojo izquierdo durante la mitad del día. El parche era color carne y ocultaba desde la parte superior del párpado hasta el principio del pómulo. Llevarlo me causaba una sensación opresiva y de injusticia. Era difícil aceptar que me lo pusieran cada mañana y que no había escondite o llanto que pudiera liberarme de aquel suplicio. Con ese parche yo debía ir a la escuela, reconocer a mi maestra y las formas de mis útiles escolares, volver a casa, comer y jugar durante una parte de la tarde. Alrededor de las 5, alguien se acercaba a mí para avisarme que era hora de desprenderlo y con esas palabras me devolvía al mundo de la claridad y de las formas nítidas. Los objetos y la gente con los que me había relacionado hasta ese momento aparecían de una manera distinta. Podía ver a distancia y deslumbrarme con la copa de los árboles y su infinidad de hojas, el contorno de las nubes en el cielo, los matices de las flores, el trazado tan preciso de mis huellas digitales. Mi vida se dividía así entre dos clases de universo. El matinal, constituido sobre todo por sonidos y estímulos olfativos, pero también por olores, colores nebulosos, y el vespertino, siempre liberador y a la vez de una precisión apabullante.
Writing with light. I was born with a white beauty mark, or what others call a birthmark, covering the cornea of my right eye. That spot would have been nothing had it not stretched across my iris and over the pupil through which light must pass to reach the back of the brain. They didn't perform cornea transplants on newborns in those days. The spot was doomed to remain for several years. And in the same way an unventilated tunnel slowly fills with mold, the pupillary blockage led to the growth of a cataract. The only advice the doctors could give my parents was to wait. By the time their daughter finished growing, medicine would surely have advanced enough to offer the solution they now lacked. In the meantime, they advised subjecting me to a series of annoying exercises to develop, as much as possible, the defective eye. This was done with ocular movements, but also, and this I remember the most, with a patch that covered my left eye for half the day. It was a piece of flesh-coloured cloth covering my upper eyelid down to the top of my cheekbone. Wearing the patch felt unfair and oppressive. It was hard to let them put it on me every morning and to accept that no hiding place and no amount of crying could save me from that torture. With the patch, I had to go to school, identify my teacher and the shapes of my school supplies, come home, eat and play for part of the afternoon. At around 5 o'clock, someone would come to say it was time to take it off. And with these words, I would return to the world of clarity and precise shapes. the people and things around me suddenly changed. I could see far into the distance and would become mesmerized by the treetops and infinite leaves that composed them, the contours of the clouds in the sky, the tint of the flowers, the intricate pattern of my fingertips. My life was divided between two worlds, that of morning, built mostly out of sounds and smells, but also of hazy colours, and that of evening, always freeing, yet at the same time overwhelmingly precise.
Así comienza El cuerpo en que nací, la novela en la que relato mi infancia, una infancia marcada por algunos acontecimientos fuertes. En lo personal, la lucha por recuperar la visión, y en lo político, el exilio de muchos pueblos latinoamericanos que huían de las dictaduras durante los años 70. Transitar entre esos dos mundos, el de la luz y el de la penumbra, me enseñó a maravillarme, como cuento en el libro, con los eventos y los objetos más cotidianos, a buscarle diferentes ángulos insospechados, a saber que tanto el detalle como las siluetas y las formas son importantes, a no confiar nunca, pero nunca, en la primera impresión, y también a no dar nada por hecho. Cada escritor tiene una manera particular de ver el mundo, y en la mía, estos claroscuros, estos juegos de la luz y las sombras, ocupan un lugar muy importante. Dado que nunca he podido abarcar mucho con la vista, debo decidir con cuidado las cosas sobre las cuales quiero dirigir mi mirada.
This is the opening to The Body Where I Was Born, the novel which tells of my childhood, a childhood defined by certain profound events. In the personal realm, my struggle to regain my sight, and in the political, the exile of so many Latin American peoples who were fleeing from the dictatorships of the 1970s. Moving back and forth between these two worlds, that of light and that of shadows, taught me to marvel, as I relate in the book, at the most quotidian objects and occurrences, to seek out different, unsuspected angles to them, to know that silhouettes and shapes are just as important as details, to never trust, ever, first impressions, as well as not to take anything for granted. Every writer has a particular way of seeing the world, and in mine, these chiaroscuros, these plays of light and shadows, hold a very important place. Since I have never been able to take much in with my sight, I must take great care when deciding which are the things I wish to focus my gaze on.
Llevar un parche en el ojo izquierdo y estar prácticamente ciega del derecho me convirtió, al menos psicológicamente, en una niña distinta cuando no abiertamente marginalizada. Tanto la actitud de mis compañeros de escuela como la constante batalla de mis padres por componerme me hicieron sentir desde muy pequeña que había venido al mundo con algo roto, algo defectuoso, algo que era necesario arreglar a toda costa. El cuerpo en que nací habla del esfuerzo sobrehumano que hicieron mis padres para integrarme en lo que ellos consideraban el grupo de la gente normal. En realidad, desde mi primera novela, El huésped, hasta la más reciente, La hija única, he intentado cuestionar las ideas que suele tener la gente con lo normal, sobre lo normal y lo anormal, conceptos en los que no creo, e invitar a los lectores a hacerlo también.
Wearing a patch over my left eye and being practically blind in the right one turned me, psychologically at least, into a child who, if not openly marginalised, was at least different. The attitude of my classmates, as well as my parents' constant battle to try and put me back together, made me feel from a very early age that I had come into the world with something broken, something defective, something that was necessary to fix at all costs. The body I was born in speaks of the superhuman effort my parents made to integrate me into what they considered the group of normal people. In fact, from my first novel, El huésped, right through to the most recent, La hija única, I have tried to question the ideas people tend to have about what is normal and what is abnormal, concepts I do not believe in, and to invite my readers to do the same.
De cerca nadie es normal, dice un refrán brasileño. Y por eso en casi todos mis libros he intentado hacer una suerte de close-up en esas supuestas anormalidades que a mí me parecen hermosas. Por un lado, y por otro poner el reflector sobre temas que la gente suele mantener a la sombra, cuando no en una franca oscuridad. Los temas incómodos, aquellos que para muchos es mejor ni voltear a ver. Por ejemplo, cuando empecé mi carrera al inicio de este siglo, la idea de belleza que prevalecía era mucho más uniforme y convencional que hoy en día. Los cuerpos que hoy llamamos disidentes eran considerados obscenos y aún no existían conceptos como el body positivity. En ese momento era poco común hablar sobre ello y todavía menos común celebrar la belleza no convencional, como lo hice en El Huésped o en Besoar, cuyos personajes son individuos con peculiaridades, ya sean físicas o psicológicas, que a veces los marginalizan. Para mí esos personajes no solo eran interesantes, sino también bellos en su unicidad. La hija única, mi novela más reciente, también explora el tema de los cuerpos divergentes. El cuerpo de Inés, sobre todo, afectado por una severa discapacidad neurológica, y la voluntad de sus padres por descubrir quién era su hija en realidad. Más allá de los diagnósticos médicos y las ideas que otros tenían sobre ella. También explora las experiencias de mujeres que eligieron no ser madres, un grupo que desde mi punto de vista aún está muy poco representado en la literatura, y los prejuicios que pesan sobre ellas. El Huésped, mi primera novela, tiene como epígrafe una frase de Jean Paulhan que podría perfectamente describir a cualquiera de mis libros. La cito aquí. Comprenda que se trata de salvarse entero con sus carencias, con sus callos, con todo lo que un hombre puede tener de inconsistente, de contradictorio, de absurdo. Todo esto es lo que se necesita poner a la luz, el loco que somos.
No one is normal close up, as the Brazilian saying goes. And this is why in almost all my books I have tried, on the one hand, to enact a kind of close-up of these supposed abnormalities, which to me seem beautiful, and on the other, to turn a spotlight on those subjects that people tend to keep in the shadows, if not in utter darkness. The uncomfortable subjects, those that many people feel it is better not even to look at. For instance, when I began my career at the start of this century, the prevailing idea of beauty was far more uniform and conventional than it is today. The bodies that we now call non-conformist were considered obscene, and the concept of body positivity did not exist yet. Back then it was rare to talk about this, and still less common to celebrate unconventional beauty, as I did in El Huésped or Besoar, whose characters are individuals with peculiarities, whether they be physical or psychological, that at times lead them to be marginalized. For me, these characters were not only interesting, but also beautiful in their uniqueness. La hija única, or Stillborn, my most recent novel, also explores the subject of divergent bodies, in particular the body of Inés, affected by a severe neurological disability, and her parents wish to discover who their daughter really is, beyond any medical diagnosis or the ideas that others have about her. It also explores the experience of women who chose not to be mothers, a group that, in my view, is still very underrepresented in literature, and the prejudices that hang over them. El Huésped, my first novel, has as an epigraph a phrase by Jean Paulhan, which could perfectly well describe any one of my books. Know that it is about saving oneself whole with one's deficiencies, with one's calluses, with all the inconsistencies, contradictions, and absurdities that a man may have. All this is what we must bring out into the light, the madman that we are.
En esa primera novela, que no ha sido traducida al inglés, la ceguera es uno de los temas fundamentales. Ana, la niña protagonista, sabe desde pequeña que cuando sea mayor se quedará ciega. La historia ocurre en la Ciudad de México y es una especie de oda a la ciudad y sus habitantes, especialmente aquellos que viven en la miseria, los que acampan en los cajeros automáticos, en las estaciones de metro o bajo los puentes, y constantemente nos interpelan sin conseguir que nos detengamos a hablar con ellos. Toda esa gente invisible sobre la cual muchas personas arrojan otro tipo de sombra, la indiferencia y el desprecio. el huésped, pétalos, después del invierno y la hija única surgen de ese esfuerzo de mirar lo que duele, lo que nos incomoda.
In this first novel, which has not yet been translated into English, blindness is one of the central themes. Anna, the young female protagonist, knows from an early age that when she grows up, she will go blind. The story takes place in Mexico City and is a kind of ode to the city and its residents, especially those who live in poverty, who camp out next to ATMs, in the stations of the metro or under bridges, and who are constantly apprehending us, yet without us ever stopping to talk to them. All these invisible people over whom many of us cast another type of shadow, indifference and disdain. El huésped, pétalos, después del invierno, after the winter, and la hija única, stillborn, emerge from this endeavor to look at what hurts us, at what makes us uncomfortable.
Volvamos a mi infancia, la década en que nací, los años 70 del siglo XX. Fue también una década muy interesante desde el punto de vista histórico. América Latina estaba azotada por dictadores militares como Augusto Pinochet en Chile, Jorge Videla en Argentina y Juan María Bordaberry en Uruguay. Regímenes fascistas que reprimían a los disidentes con tortura y asesinatos clandestinos. La mayoría de los intelectuales y artistas se oponían a esos gobiernos y muchos de ellos se vieron obligados a exiliarse para salvar su vida. México abrió las puertas a todas esas familias refugiadas y yo tuve la suerte de nacer y pasar mi niñez en el barrio en el que ellos vivían. Crecí escuchando diferentes acentos del español. Descubrí, por ejemplo, que las calabacitas también se pueden llamar zapallitos o calabacines. Aprendí costumbres que no eran exactamente las mías, como beber mate o tomar la leche a las 4 de la tarde. Vivir entre migrantes me hizo desarrollar una curiosidad por las culturas diferentes que no me ha abandonado, y también un respeto profundo por la gente que se ve obligada a abandonar su país para empezar desde cero.
Let's return to my childhood. The decade I was born in, the 1970s, was also an interesting one from a historical perspective. Latin America was being ravaged by military dictatorships, such as those of Augusto Pinochet in Chile, Jorge Videla in Argentina, and Juan María Bordaberry in Uruguay. Fascist regimes that repressed dissidents with torture and clandestine assassinations. Most artists and intellectuals were opposed to these governments, and many of them were forced into exile to save their lives. Mexico opened its doors to all these refugee families, and I had the good fortune to be born in and spend my childhood the neighborhood where they all ended up living. I grew up hearing different accents in Spanish. I found out, for instance, that calabacitas, or courgettes, can also be called zapallitos or calabacines, zucchini or little squash. I learned customs that were not precisely my own, such as drinking mate or a glass of milk at 4 in the afternoon. Living amongst migrants led me to develop a sense of curiosity towards different cultures, something that has stayed with me, as has a deep respect for people who are forced to leave their countries and start from zero.
Los seres humanos, como muchas otras especies animales, somos migratorios. Según los historiadores, el Homo sapiens ha sido mucho más tiempo nómada que sedentario. El movimiento y la capacidad para adaptarnos a muy diversos entornos está arraigado en nuestro ADN. Sin embargo, en los últimos años, la migración se ha estado abordando únicamente como un problema. Nos hemos olvidado de toda su complejidad y de los efectos benéficos que también tiene. En mi más reciente libro de cuentos, la figura del albatros representa a estos exiliados latinoamericanos que tuvieron que recorrer largas distancias para salvar su vida. Pero también a todos los que sin ser migrantes hemos perdido la orientación por la velocidad con la que está cambiando el mundo desde la crisis sanitaria que vivimos durante el 2020, cuyas secuelas psicológicas seguimos viendo hoy en día. Los vertiginosos acontecimientos políticos, pero también la incertidumbre y la ansiedad que despierta en nosotros el cambio climático. Creo que todos podemos estar de acuerdo en que estamos asistiendo a un momento difícil para la humanidad. En los últimos años, el mundo parece haberse decantado por el oscurantismo, las políticas autoritarias, los prejuicios nacionalistas, el racismo y otras actitudes que en el pasado han conducido a catástrofes como la Segunda Guerra Mundial.
Human beings, like many other animal species, are migratory. According to historians, Homo sapiens has spent more time being nomadic than sedentary. Movement and the ability to adapt to a highly diverse range of environments are ingrained in our DNA. In recent years, however, migration has been seen solely as a problem to tackle. We have forgotten all about its complexity and the beneficial effects it can also have. In my most recent collection of short stories, I used the albatross to represent those Latin American exiles who had to cross long distances in order to survive, but also all those who, without being migrants, have been blown off course by the speed with which the world is changing, what with the global health crisis we went through in 2020, the psychological after effects of which we are still seeing today, all the dizzying political events, but also the uncertainty and anxiety the climate crisis stirs up in us. I think we can all agree that we are witnessing a difficult moment for humanity. In the last few years, the world seems to have moved closer towards obscurantism, authoritarian politics, nationalist prejudices, racism, and other attitudes that in the past have led to catastrophes such as the Second World War.
Aunque siempre he pensado que ni el arte ni la literatura tienen la obligación de servir a ninguna causa política, por importante o urgente que sea, es decir, que su única finalidad verdadera es ser arte y ser literatura, también creo que ambos son particularmente eficaces cuando describen situaciones extremas como la persecución, la deportación, el hambre, el exilio, la inmigración, y conseguir que quienes no las hemos vivido en persona nos pongamos en el lugar de quienes sí lo han hecho. Más que la inmensa mayoría de los textos periodísticos, la literatura es un vehículo muy poderoso de empatía. Estoy pensando en libros como Si esto es un hombre, de Primo Levi, Un saco de canicas, de Joseph Joffo, La llamada, de Leila Guerriero, Temporada de huracanes, de Fernanda Melchor, Pequeño país, de Gael Faye, donde el desarraigo y especialmente la angustia de ser perseguido se abordan maravillosamente. Aunque no creo que la literatura deba tener una causa política, creo en su capacidad para permitirnos imaginar y ver a nuestros vecinos. La capacidad de imaginar al otro, de ponernos en sus zapatos, es un conjuro muy poderoso contra el fanatismo. La literatura tiene el poder de permitirnos conectarnos y ver más allá de ideologías y prejuicios, entrar en una zona de intimidad en la vida cotidiana de otras personas y otras naciones y compartir sus historias, sus miedos, sus esperanzas y sus experiencias de vida, es decir, de arrojar luz sobre los otros y permitir que los veamos.
Although I have always thought that neither art nor literature is obliged to serve any political cause, no matter how important or urgent it might be. That is, that its only real purpose is to be art and to be literature. I also believe that they are both particularly effective when it comes to describing extreme situations, such as persecution, deportation, hunger, exile, immigration, and to putting those of us who have not lived through these things personally in the position of those who have. More so than the great majority of journalistic texts, literature is a powerful vehicle for empathy. I'm thinking of books such as If This Is a Man by Primo Levi, A Bag of Marbles by Joseph Joffo, The Phone Call by Leila Guerrero, Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor, and Small Country by Gael Faye, where the experience of being uprooted, and especially the anguish of being persecuted, are dealt with superbly. Although I do not believe that literature should have a political cause, I do believe in its capacity to allow us to imagine and to see our neighbours. The capacity to imagine the other, to put ourselves in their shoes, is an incredibly powerful spell against fanaticism. Literature has the power to allow us to connect with each other, to see ourselves beyond ideologies and prejudices, to enter into a zone of intimacy, into the everyday lives of other people, other nations, and to share their stories, their fears, their hopes and their life experiences. In other words, to shed light on the other and allow us to truly see them.
La diferencia y la migración, la aceptación de los humanos por otros seres humanos, son a muy resumidas cuentas los temas de los que me he ocupado en mi ficción. Pero hay otra faceta de mi trabajo de la que me gustaría hablarles. Para eso, volvamos una última vez a mi infancia. Cuando estaba en la escuela primaria, esa escuela Montessori que describo en El cuerpo en que nací, unos amigos y yo hicimos un periódico mural que se llamaba La Hormiga y luego una revista fotocopiada que se llamaba La Voz. Desde entonces he seguido con fervor a las revistas literarias y culturales. Varios años después, cuando estudiaba en la universidad, edité con otro grupo de amigos una revista de literatura latinoamericana llamada Semestral, de literatura latinoamericana joven. Y luego una llamada Número 0. En esa época, por increíble que parezca ahora, no había internet aún. Y las revistas eran esa plataforma pública fundamental para poder leernos entre jóvenes y estar al tanto de lo que hacían nuestros contemporáneos en otros países del mundo. En las revistas confluyen los esfuerzos de personas con diferentes historias y puntos de vista. Constituyen un espacio de diálogo privilegiado que es indispensable defender. Aunque algunas lograron conseguir apoyos institucionales, estas revistas se publicaron primero con nuestro dinero y el de nuestros amigos.
Difference and migration, the acceptance of humans by other humans, are, in short, the subjects I have tried to tackle in my fiction. But there is another aspect of my work that I would like to talk to you about. For this, let's return one last time to my childhood. When I was in primary school, that Montessori school I described in El cuerpo en que nací, some friends and I put together a news bulletin called La Hormiga, or The Ant, that was pinned up on a board each week, and later on a photocopied magazine called La Voz, The Voice. Ever since then, I have been a keen follower of literary and cultural magazines. Years later, when I was a student at university, along with a different group of friends, I edited a magazine of Latin American youth literature called Semestral, and later one called Número 0. Back then, as incredible as it might seem now, there was no internet yet, and magazines were an essential public platform for us youngsters to be able to read each other and to keep up to date with what our contemporaries were doing in other countries around the world. In the pages of these magazines, the endeavours of people with different stories, different points of view all converge. They constitute an exceptional space for dialogue that it is crucial to defend. While some went on to find institutional support, at first these magazines were published with our own money and that of our friends.
Entre 2017 y 2024 tuve la suerte de dirigir la revista de la Universidad de México, publicada por la UNAM. Fue un proyecto muy emocionante, pues implicaba retomar una publicación histórica y, sin dejar de honrar su tradición, transformarla de manera que resultara atractiva para los jóvenes. La revista se publicó tanto en línea como de manera impresa y llegó a tener 300,000 lectores en todo el mundo. Publicamos cerca de 80 números monográficos e interdisciplinarios donde confluían las ciencias, la literatura y las humanidades, alrededor de temas tan importantes como identidad, emergencia climática, racismo, éxodo, discapacidad, agua, familias, extinción, descolonización, feminismos, violencia, escuela.
Between 2017 and 2024, I was lucky enough to edit the Revista de la Universidad de México, published by the UNAM, the National Autonomous University of Mexico. It was an emotional project because it involved taking a historic publication and transforming it in such a way that it appealed to young people, while still honouring its tradition. The magazine was published online as well as in print form, and ended up having 300,000 readers around the world. We produced around 80 special interdisciplinary editions, in which the sciences, literature, and the humanities all converged, covering topics as important as identity, the climate emergency, racism, water, families, extinction, decolonization, feminisms, violence, and school.
Pienso que todo escritor debería editar alguna vez. Para alguien acostumbrado al silencio y a la serenidad de un estudio, a los tiempos que le indica su propio trabajo, a menudo autorreferencial, la edición constituye un auténtico reto, una oportunidad de escapar del solipsismo e interesarse por el quehacer de los demás. No solo de modo egoísta como ocurre cuando leemos para nutrir nuestras propias creaciones, sino con la disposición alegre y generosa de quien organiza una fiesta. Al hacerlo me di cuenta de que ambas labores tenían más en común de lo que yo creía. Para componer cada número de una revista también es necesario encontrar un tono, un ritmo, un orden, un enfoque. Como la escritura, la edición nos hace pasar por momentos de éxtasis y de desesperación. Editar una revista cultural me permitió abarcar temas políticos que desde la ficción yo jamás habría podido tocar. En otras palabras, me permitió arrojar la luz de un reflector muy poderoso sobre personas que por su origen y su condición social, o simplemente porque carecen de las herramientas del lenguaje, no siempre encuentran un espacio para ser escuchadas como se merecen y desde esas páginas ayudarlas a brillar.
I think every writer should edit at some point in their career. For someone accustomed to the silence and serenity of their study, to the rhythm their own work, often self-referential, suggests to them, editing constitutes a genuine challenge, an opportunity to escape from the solipsism and to take an interest in the work others are engaging in, not selfishly, as happens when we read so as to fortify our own creations, but with the joyous, generous attitude of someone planning a party. As I did it, I realized that both tasks had more in common than I first believed. In order to put together each issue of the magazine, it is also necessary to find a tone, a rhythm, an order, a focus. As with writing, editing forces us to go through moments of ecstasy and of despair. Editing a cultural magazine allowed me to cover political subjects that I would never have been able to touch upon in fiction. It allowed me, in short, to shine a powerful spotlight on those who, because of where they came from or their social class, or simply because they lack the necessary language, cannot always find a space where they will be listened to as they deserve to be, and to help them shine back out from the pages.
En México tenemos el dicho de la vista nace el amor, que es similar a el amor empieza en los ojos. Significa que para amar a alguien primero es necesario que lo veamos. Esto se aplica muy bien a la comida y a la atracción entre las personas, pero también a otro tipo de amor que es el de la compasión en su sentido etimológico, sentir con el otro. Precisamente lo que nuestra sociedad y nuestro planeta más necesitan hoy en día. Para terminar, quisiera decir que no creo que haya mucho que como individuos podamos hacer en este momento para cambiar la dirección tan sombría que ha tomado el mundo en los últimos años y que está poniendo a tantos seres humanos en peligro. Lo que sí podemos, y quiero exhortarlos a hacer, es cuidar nuestra luz. Esa empatía y esa lucidez de las que hablaba antes, como se cuida la llama de una vela, y mantenerla fuerte para cuando se presente la ocasión, ofrecerla a quien esté cerca de nosotros y la necesite. Y también, para cuando llegue el momento, poder unirla a la luz de muchos otros, los colectivos, las comunidades que todavía creen en la posibilidad de un mundo mejor y estén dispuestos a construirlo.
In Mexico, we have a saying that goes, de la vista nace el amor. Something like, we only fall in love once we see the loved one, or perhaps the heart follows the eyes, which is similar to el amor empieza en los ojos, love begins in the eyes. It means that in order to love someone, first we need to see them. This applies very well to food and to attraction between people, but also to another kind of love, which is that of compassion, in its etymological sense, to feel with the other, precisely what our society and our planet most need these days. To conclude, I would like to say that I do not believe that there is a great deal that we as individuals can do at this time to change the incredibly dark direction the world has taken over the last few years, and which is putting so many human lives in danger. What we can do, and what I would like to urge you all to do, is to care for our own light, the empathy and the lucidity I referred to earlier, just as one cares for the flame of a candle, and keep it burning brightly, so that when the occasion arises, we can offer it to whoever is near us and might need it. And also that when the time comes, we can add it to the light of many others, the collectives and communities that still believe in the possibility of a better world and who are prepared to build it.
Muchas gracias.
You want to stay here for some Q&A?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
If you...
She has very generously agreed to take questions, and I'm here to bring the mic to you. Somebody needs to break the ice.
Guadalupe, thank you so much for that beautiful talk, and also for your translation as well. Just thinking about the history of the Puterbaugh going back to 1968, the emphasis on bilingualism has been really prevalent throughout that history. And as we're sitting here next to this construction site, I think of Kafka's Pit of Babel, which is kind of an allegory for translators in the 20th century, where we're not punished for being multilingual. We're all just kind of down in the pit, working together to create works in other languages and bring them into English or into other forms. So I'm wondering if you could talk to the students here a little bit about how being bilingual growing up influenced you as a writer, and what you would recommend to someone who might want to become more globally minded through languages.
Thank you, Fanny. Of course, I guess many of you here are bilingual somehow, or at least from what I've heard, have been hearing another language at home, even if you are not able to talk that language. So I think it's a great, chance to speak different languages, because especially if you like language, and I suppose you do because you're here, you can start to compare different ways of thinking, different ways of constructing sentences, different expressions and sayings. So it's not only about language, which it is of course, but also about cultures, and you can be nourished. I think language nourishes us, and you can be also nourished by this knowledge that the cultures carry with them along the centuries.
I think we need a question from the Puterbaugh class. You all right here. Which one of you? Sorry, it's got to be one of you. I'll just hand it over. You can do it.
Thank you for your speech. My question would be about the elements of abnormal or absurd that you have in your writing. Where did they come from? That would be, although you kind of talked about that a little bit in your speech, but because I really like weird stuff, and it's always interesting to me, is it something that you think is kind of ingrained in life, in normal life in Mexico, for example, or is it something that's more personal? Thank you. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yes, as I was saying before, by the time I grew up, we weren't as open as diversity as we are now. So, especially in France, that's something that wasn't very nice about that culture. People were almost forced to be in uniform, it's very shocking when you go to Paris, especially because people dress the same way. The trends are very, very strong, and everyone follows that. And you are supposed to melt into the mass of people. You're not supposed to stand out. If you do, there's something weird about you, and you become suspicious, or at least not like the others, and they will judge you, observe you, and at some point reject you. So that was my experience, and that's why I started to. In Mexico, it's not as strong as as it is in France, and from what I heard in the UK, it's neither the case. In schools, people are not supposed to never to stand out, never be original or different, and. Yeah, but Mexico, it's more open, like since we are a very, very diverse country, people are not judging so much the others for the way they look. But in traditional Mexican families, there is a lot of you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you should behave like this, especially for women. Like you shouldn't sit that way, you shouldn't speak that way, women don't speak like that. And awful things like never show you're intelligent because you will never find a husband. There is a saying about that. Like a woman who speaks Latin will never find a husband or have a good end. So, and I was very aware of these kind of warnings, from my family or from everyone. And that's why I was very, very rebel since I was little. Some people call me insolent. But that's something that I wanted to defend, and I found in writing a way to do that, to defend especially the dissident bodies, as we call them today. By the time I didn't have that vocabulary. And it was a chance in a way because I could, truly go and look into my feelings and into my goals, what I was feeling against that, and not relying only in, already self-made expressions, already made expressions that didn't exist. Mm-hmm.
Questions?
Get a faculty and volunteer, and that always works.
Thank you so much for the talk. It was beautiful. I wanted to ask you about the animals in your work. It's so beautiful, the presence of the animals and the way you seem to observe them and to notice the little things about their behavior and things like that.
Thank you. I love this question. Actually, I when I was little, I was longing for us to communicate with ETs, I wanted to see other kind of forms of life from other planets. We don't have ETs, but we have animals. And it's beautiful to see the diversity in nature. It's something that always amazes me, like the difference that we can find in, and at the same time, a lot of similitudes between human beings and them. It's like we have been relying so much and being so proud about our reason, like the fact that we can reason. We have thought that we are superiors to them because we have this capacity of knowing, of thinking, and we assume they don't. But I think that we have at the same time lose a lot of our capacity to connect with our instincts and intuitions that they have. When I see animals in nature, I can see that everything is possible in nature and there is nothing against nature, as the Catholic Church has tried to make us believe for many centuries. There's nothing against nature because everything exists, every behavior exists there without any guilt, actually. So there is homosexuality in nature. Many species practice that. There is also more than, the couple for sexuality. You can look at serpents, snakes, they gather together in bunches of, 50 of them, and they make love, all of them. So erotism is very, very diverse in nature, and also the way they raise the cubs as well. That's very inspiring, because in nature you can have, like packs raising the cubs together, groups of females raising the cubs together, or males also, like penguins or many species of fish. So we can learn a lot of possibilities about dynamics and human behavior looking at animals. And also, of course, they are very beautiful and moving.
I was just wondering, you talk in The Body Where I Was Born about being influenced by writers like Kafka and Huxley, and I was wondering if there were any Latin American writers that influenced you in your childhood, or current Latin American writers that inspire you today.
Yeah. I think a writer that has influenced me a lot is Julio Cortázar, that I've read and read and read many times at different moments of my life. He is a master in what comes to short story telling. I think there's no one like him, actually, either in the past or nowadays, in short storytelling. And also his way of, seeing literature as not as something very serious, but as a play, as, creation, as this mood where you are open to surprise and trying to, to find something, but it doesn't matter if you don't, actually, at the same time. And his relationship with music in literature, I really like this writer. But there are many others, and I think that this is a time where I'm reading more Latin American writers. I think it's a very, very strong moment for Latin American literature. We were speaking about the boom yesterday, these writers that I've read, of course, but whom I didn't feel very close or related. And nowadays, even, I don't know, in every country, I could name a writer that inspires me. And either men or female.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Sir, you get the honor. This is a big moment. No pressure.
Thank you. Love the presentation. I especially like the idea of the artist as a person who doesn't have a political program or agenda, but nevertheless shines a light on the human situation in such a way to put a check on fanaticism. So my question is, how does that play out for you in Latin America? What are the dangers that you can shine a light on in order to provide this kind of check, if I read you correctly?
Mm-hmm. When I was young, I was always very concerned and preoccupied by the fact that, people were always telling you, as a Latin American writer, you have to do something for your people on your writing, and your writing has to be committed to these causes, And I was rebelling against that, because I think that creation, literature, art in general are mostly a play, it comes from inspiration. I even think that it comes from, other powers, supernatural powers. I really believe in inspiration, the way the Greeks used to see it. So we are more like antennas, we would say that. Antenna. That would catch what is in the air. And sometimes that which is in the air is anger, and rebellion and these kind of things. And we don't have to try to manipulate that, to convince people of this or that, because I think, honestly, that art will always survive political causes and periods of history. And we shouldn't lose that magic gift we have, this magic gift that humanity has, which is art. but also when it really comes from this inspiration, when the antenna caps these movements, these thoughts, and these willings of freedom, for instance, it can be very powerful, but it has to be very like true. Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you tonight at the reception, 7 o'clock in Baird Lounge downstairs. Please join me in thanking Guadalupe Nettel.